Is he hitting her? Stop it! Please, please. Okay, we're going to be there. We're taking your baby. Stop it! No.
Domestic violence is a worldwide problem that affects both women and men alike. This year alone, the number of cases is projected to increase by more than 20% amidst a global health crisis. But it is a problem that can be addressed, corrected, and eliminated, one victim at a time. Overcoming is not easy, and if it seems almost impossible, perhaps these brave testimonies of survival will help you to believe that you too can persevere, overcome, and survive.
So a lot of these issues that we talk about tie together. One of the things that I think is really important that we talk about here at Prevail is developmental assets and creating safe environments. So safe, stable, nurturing environments create people who are healthy adults in the future.
Where did I grow up? I grew up in a little city called Anderson, Indiana. It was the General Motors town. You either work at General Motors or you went away to college.
In Fort Wayne, Indiana. Not as big as Indianapolis, but Fort Wayne's a pretty good size city.
Growing up, it was very difficult. My mother was in high school, so she had me while she was in high school. And my father had already graduated. And once she was pregnant and he met someone else, ended up marrying that person, so I was left, there was like a friction between that.
Two sisters, one older, one younger. So I feel like I was always the one to get in trouble because older sister knew better, younger sister didn't know better, and I should have known better. So whatever it is that they pulled, it was always like, Michelle, Michelle, Michelle.
Definitely a church girl, born and raised in the church. All my creative juices and things was awakened in church.
Mom and dad were both in the home. My dad passed away in a car accident when I was 17. It happened to be right around Easter that he passed away.
But ironically, as big as my family was on both sides, I don't think I ever felt like I fit. Don't think I ever feel like I fit. My mom didn't mean to do it, but she did it. The anger, it reflected on me. It was always, you're just like your dad. You lazy, you this, you that. It's always something. I was never good enough.
It made me not want to depend on anyone, especially a man, because I felt like if my dad could leave and we were so young and to leave us, I know it wasn't his choice to leave, but to leave us in a struggle and to figure, we were young. I was 17 and my sister Nick was younger than me. Sherry was 2 years older, but we were still young where we still needed our dad. And without that influence, it just put me into a spot where, okay, well, my dad was the only one that I really needed, so.
My parents got divorced not long after that, and that was the beginning of some really rough times for me. I was definitely a daddy's girl, and my mom made sure I knew it too, that I was a daddy's girl. So him not being in the home definitely affected me. I don't think we are capable of knowing it in that moment, in those moments. There's no way at 9 or 10 years old you can say, oh, I'm feeling this way because my daddy's not here, But hindsight, I definitely can see the deficits that were there for me because my dad wasn't in the house. And so I always was trying to fit in, try to
do my best so that I could be, feel needed, wanted, and that was the hard part.
I was a fighter. So, yeah, if there was a struggle, it was just me just staying in school. I mean, it wasn't like I was expelled, like every other week or something, but I had a few expulsions for fighting. One of them was racially based. I just didn't, she was calling me names that, were uncalled for, so she shouldn't have done that, but. So there was that one, and then the second one was over my sister, Nicole, my younger sister. There was 2 girls that were messing with her, and they were older, and they were even older than me, so I went and took care of it, and I got expelled for it.
So, although my mom was, had all this family, she was a preacher's kid, and I remember her talking about how hard it was being raised in that house, because my grandfather, it was home church school. That was it, home church school. So as soon as she turned 18, like her first thing was to get out and get married, which would have been cool, but then she started experimenting. All the stuff that she couldn't do when she was a teenager living in my grandfather's house, she started doing even as a wife. So my dad dealt with her partying, and I don't know if she ever drank, but she definitely started experimenting with drugs. And my dad's a clean-cut guy, never drank, never smoked, none of that stuff. And so he tried to hang in there with her and gave her an ultimatum. And I can still remember it to this day. By this time we were back in Indiana, and he just kind of told her, like, you're gonna have to stop partying or I gotta go. And I remember my dad leaving that night.
So one of the things that I think is really important when we talk about early life, or how somebody becomes a victim, maybe what their early life looked like, I really want to redirect that conversation to talking about perpetrators too. So it's really important to recognize that victims aren't to be blamed for their experience, but the perpetrators are really the ones with the responsibility for that experience.
So growing up, Mom had met an older man, and she they had a lot of fight. It was always violence, always just fighting all the time. Where now when I hear people argue or fight, I gotta go, because I don't do well with that. So I dealt with that mostly, all my childhood.
I don't know that I ever recovered from that time period in my life, because in addition to her being an addict, she would speak really horribly to me.
Where is your emergency?
Sheltered in place.
He also choked her. Who was trying to fight her?
My stepdad.
In close quarters with their abusers.
Did he hit you anywhere else or just in the mouth?
And frustrations running high.
She's aggressive, wanting to fight.
These going into high school, it was very controlled. I had to be in before dark. I couldn't go places because of my stepfather. He was like, you need to be in the house before dark.
I think a lot of us understand that hurt people, so maybe they did have some experiences that were traumatic in their early life. But there are also some who have experienced privilege in their life and feel like then they have a right to continue to that privilege as well, and that influences how they exercise power and control over others. So I think it's important to realize some people exercise power and control because they don't have it, and others continue to exercise it because they are accustomed to it.
I met him, actually it's kind of crazy, my older sister Sherry was dating his brother. Let's see, I was 13, so Sherry was 16. And I don't even remember how Sherry met him. I think maybe at the festival or something. And she started going over to their house to visit, and my mom and dad wouldn't let her go by herself, so she drugged me along with her. And that's how I met him. They were actually brothers.
But I remember being with the family, and they were laughing and joking about the baby brother. and he was in jail and was soon to get out. And they were kind of talking about like, well, you know, I hope he got his head on straight this time, and you know, blah blah, and they start reminiscing.
Their family life was just completely different from ours. Their upbringing, their demeanor, I mean, just everything about them. It was just like intriguing because I've never been subjected to anything like that or anyone like that. They were bad. They were fighters, and you know, they were into drugs, and you know, they had a reputation about them. And where I'm coming from, you know, from the north side of Fort Wayne, that was just like different. So of course it drew my attention.
Like, he taught me how to fight, he taught me how to box, he taught me how to save money. He taught me a lot of things that were good, but then the abuse part was not the good part.
So I remember sitting back, listening to these stories that they told about him and things that he would do to girls, and just thinking, anybody ever gonna do that? I wish somebody would try that with me.
Well, I was like 12 and I was asleep, and I woke up to him touching me, and I was like taken aback, and I felt, I don't know even how to express that. I was just hurt and I couldn't understand. And then when I pushed him away, he just had a smirk on his face, and I didn't understand what was happening.
You know, you go through that moment like, this can never happen to you. You almost like you have more strength than these women or whatever.
I've always kind of, when I do community presentations or share this information with the community, I always talk about, you know, if on a first date somebody showed up at the door and punched you in the face, there wouldn't be a second date, and we would not have to worry about domestic violence.
When I seen him though, I was there the day that somebody went and picked him up and brought him to the parents' house, because at this point I'm hanging with the family like every day, right? He walks in and it's like I completely forgot all the stories that I heard. He was fine. He was fine. Light skin, pretty eyes, slim build, and he was something totally different than what I had ever experienced. He had a little gold, you know, he had a little gold tooth. He had a little swag to him, and it threw me. It threw me. So initially, he didn't act like he had any interest. He spoke, I spoke, you know, it was no big deal. But I'll never forget the Sunday after church when he asked me to go to dinner with him. And none of the stories, none of that registered to me, because I'm the girl with the wounded self-esteem, with the low self-esteem, who always just wanted to be seen. Like, I just wanted to be good enough, you know? And so for him to want to sit and eat with me, it was like, okay, you know? Yeah, and that was the beginning of my, and I was intrigued by him.
I didn't tell anybody because who do I tell? And he already told me that if I say anything, everybody's gonna say it's me, that I did this, that I caused this. And then the fact that I'm all he has, you know, your dad doesn't even want you. He's like, and your mom can't take care of you. I take care of all of y'all, so I didn't say anything.
When I started noticing things going bad with him, actually it wasn't, now that I sit here and think about it, it wasn't like years later where someone was like, oh, I just didn't know that he had that in him. I mean, I knew it from the very beginning. Like I said, they were fighters. I guess I just didn't think anyone could be that mean to a woman, especially to a woman that he said that he loved.
911, this is Pat. What's your emergency? I have a stalker. He's been out here in his house son all day long. He's been out here across the street watching my house. I don't know what his plan is. If you can look up my name, you can see it's 100,000, about 1,000 complaints. But ain't nobody doing nothing.
He had molested me from the time I was 12 till I was 17. And so everything, I was like tightly knit. He controlled everything. That part hurts the most. When you trust someone as a father figure and then that happens, so.
But we were young, and what did I know? I didn't know any better. I didn't know that this wasn't, I knew it wasn't okay, but I had never experienced anything like that before. So I'm thinking, okay, it must be something I'm doing wrong, But it didn't take long, definitely within that first year. And I remember the very first time that he hit me, I don't even remember what the argument was about, but I was in high school, and we had went over, and he had said, let's go on a walk. And I said, on a walk? That's just not him. So I said, okay. So he took me up to he lives beside some railroad tracks. So he took me up to the railroad tracks, and we're standing there. It was a nice day, because I remember I had on shorts, and I love purple, and there were some purple flowers growing on the side of the railroad tracks. And I looked over, and he was like, oh, did you see that? Did you notice that purple flower? He was like, go look at it. I was like, okay. So yeah, it caught my eye too, because it's purple. So I go over, and as I have my back to him, next thing I know, I'm falling over, because he had came up from behind me and just like kicked me in the back of my head, jumped. He was really good in karate. So he did I want to say like a roundhouse kick, and kicked me in the back of my head, where I just fell over. And I'm on the ground, and I'm just kind of like stunned, like what's going on? What just happened? Did I look at the flower wrong? You just told me to come over and look at this flower, but I think that was, he didn't want to see me in my face when he did that for the first time. But, and I don't even remember how long it lasted. I don't remember how long it lasted. I don't remember walking back to his house, but I remember when I got there, I told my sister Sherry, and she was like, well, what did you do? You must have done something. I said, what do you mean what I did? I said, just let's go. I'm ready to go home. Just take me home. And that was the first time. They always say, I didn't talk to him. I don't remember for how long. I know it was, I try to be like, this isn't right. I can't go through this. But I did. My Sherry wanted to go back. I had no choice but to go. I could have had a choice, I guess, now that I look back at it. But at the time, I didn't know any better. So, yeah, I went back, and it continued.
So that's not how this starts. Very often what we hear is that a lot of the things that feel really good at the beginning of a relationship are actually tactics that start this process.
We dated 9 months. We dated twice. This was crazy. We dated twice. So that day that we went out to eat, we decided we were going to date. And we dated for about 9 months. Now, during this 9 months, he had open cases with the state, with this girl, the Nair and all of that, right? He still had open cases with her. And so I remember one time we were at the house, and I had to wash my hair. He was like, "You want me to wash your hair for you?" I just thought that was the sweetest thing. So I remember being bent over the sink, and I had my hand wrapped around his waist, and he just washing my hair. I was so in love. But then he needed to use my car to go over and talk to the girl. They was trying to convince the girl not to show up for court, because if she didn't show up for court, then the state wouldn't have a case, and then these charges would be dropped. I'm not thinking about any of that. I'm thinking about how he's treating me. He was amazing. He was sweet to me. He was sweet to me.
I remember I was about 6 years old and she had met her then husband, and I told her, I was like, Mom, look, like, I don't like him. I don't think he's good for you or whatever. And, you know, being an adult, you're not really going to listen to a 5, 6 year old kid.
He said to me, I got a call on my life. Like, I know God has called me to preach, and I need a strong woman by my side that'll help me walk in my call.
The other thing is that all of those things in the beginning of a relationship build love, and truly, I talk to victims all the time who love the person who's abusing them, and sometimes even believe, if I can just help him a little bit more, if there's one more thing that I can do, he could be better. And that's just not always the case. But it's a natural human emotion that we love people. We are meant to be in community. So, and it's hard to give up on that. So a really compassionate, empathetic person, all good traits, may mean that I stay in a relationship that's not healthy for me longer than I maybe could or should.
So I decided to go into the military to get away from everything, to start my life, to make my own decisions, and to be in charge. And I didn't know that not handling those issues from childhood abuse would come up and affect me then. Got into the military, got into an abusive relationship, and I put up with it because at that point I had gotten pregnant, and I wanted my child to know his father. I didn't want him being without his father. So I was like, okay, I'll just do what I need to do so that my son will be with his father. And I put up with a lot of abuse. I mean, like a lot, where my self-esteem was like really low.
So instantly when he said, I just need a strong woman, I'm like, ooh, I can already sing. Like, I could see myself singing right before he started preaching. I'll be sitting on the second row. Like, I just fantasized. I created this whole fantasy around that one phone call from him. And I couldn't let it go. No matter how bad things got, I could not let that fantasy that I created in my head that day from that one phone call, I could not let it go.
But I didn't let anybody know that. It was basically me. Every time you saw me, I was always smiling, playful, laugh. Covered it up until when the kids started getting affected. Then that's when I would stand up. It was like I was a mama bear, or I would protect people that they were like, I don't know what you call them, where they couldn't fend for themselves. So I would step in. I don't know where I got that courage from, but I would always protect other people, but not myself. I don't understand that.
He called me and wanted to use my car, and I was like, well, no, because we gotta go to Target and get paper towels and blah, blah, blah. And he called me a B. Like, he got upset and called me a B. He had never called me out my name, ever called me out my name. But I knew he had been looking for a job. I knew he had a felony. I knew that it was harder for felons to find, decent paying jobs or whatever. So I was like, he's stressed out. I mean, I get it. He can't find no job. Excuse, that was the first excuse.
So one of the tools that we use here at Prevail is the power and control wheel, which is a way that if you could think of it as a wheel, the axis is really power and control. That's where all the power comes from. Where the rubber hits the road is the domestic or sexual violence, but all those spokes in the middle are really important tactics that make the whole thing kind of stay together. So that can be minimizing, so saying, it's not that big of a deal, or denying it never happened, or blaming it wouldn't have happened if you hadn't done what you did.
Keeping me away from my family, he wouldn't allow my sisters to come over, or my mom, or it's just, being separated. He didn't want anyone else around me. His brothers, oh my gosh, I remember, this is of course years later, because I already had all my kids then, and we were having a birthday party. I don't remember for which, I want to say for Santino. And we invited all his brothers over and their girlfriends and their kids. and he accused me of playing footsie with one of his brothers at the table. And that night, I remember little Javier, he was probably 7 or 8. That night it was so bad that he opened up the window in his bedroom and ran to the neighbors for help.
We got married the week before Thanksgiving, 2005. I made plans for my mom to keep my little boy that night. And so I'm thinking we're gonna go home after we got married and we're gonna have a great night together, right? I spent 3 hours that night arguing with him about who all he didn't like in my life. He didn't trust my dad. He didn't like my bonus mom. He didn't like my best friend. He thought my little brother was shady. And for the sake of getting past the argument, I agreed. I participated in him cutting me off from my family. So for every argument that he had, my rebuttal was, okay, I just won't go over there. Okay, I just won't let him come over. Okay, I just won't talk to him that often. And I was agreeing that night for him to cut me off from people. And that was the beginning of the hell train, the night that I got married. Because prior to that, he didn't have any issues with anybody. But that night that we got married, he didn't like anybody.
It wasn't until I was about a freshman in high school to where I really understood what she was going through and what she went through at that time.
And I thought that would change him. You know, I thought that would be what would make him snap out of it. When my daughter was born, it got worse. I have had a black eye and a busted lip. Had to get stitches in my lip.
Still hadn't dealt with any of my issues. I just kept on, and I kept allowing people to dump on me and dump on me and dump on me, and I just went along with it. And I got to the point where I was really starting to feel suicidal because when I was younger, I did try to commit suicide. And then once I was going through the divorce and I lost my twins, and the back and forth of trying to keep my kids with, without my ex taking them from me, I got to the point where I felt like that the kids loved him more than they loved me, and I got in a bad place again.
So anyway, so we go into Fernando's house this night, and he tells Fernando, he was like, this bitch is constantly telling me how miserable she is. He was like, so I'm just going to take her out her miserable life tonight. He was like, so I need my peace. And Fernando looked at him, and I looked at him, and I was like, oh, so this is, And I said it right there. I said, so you're just going to kill me? And what's going to happen with my kids? Because I know you're not going to take care of them. He was like, well, you won't have to worry about that because you won't be here. So Fernando takes him in the back room, and I don't know if Fernando did that on purpose and for me to be able to get away, but when they went to the back room, I did. I just got up and calmly walked out the door.
In all of this, though, the brainwashing was so real that he had me convinced that I was the problem in the marriage, that he couldn't get a job because of me, he couldn't keep a job because of me, we argued all the time because of me, my baby cried all the time because of me, and so I attempted suicide. I figured that since I was a problem, that I would resolve the problem for everybody.
Dallas 911, what is your emergency? Please, I'm not doing nothing! Please, baby!
We're reporting.
I'm not doing nothing to you!
We're reporting.
I think the one that sticks to my mind the most is when me and my oldest sister were trying to protect her, and we jumped in front of her thinking that we were helping, and we all ended up getting hit by him pretty much all at the same time or all in a row. and nobody could control him. I think that was probably the scariest thing out of all of it is police couldn't control him, his family couldn't control him, my family couldn't control him. He was just always out of control and nobody wanted to approach him. Countless times police would not even come to help because they said, oh, you live out of the city limits, we can't go there, or they knew their last name, so police were not coming because they knew there was so many brothers and it would cause a big scene. So oftentimes she was left by herself with his family watching him beat her. Sorry. At this point, this is like a year had gone by since the last time we were actually together, and he kept just saying, you know, when you don't want to be with me, you figure out how to do it with the kids. So it was like like there was like 2 years there where he had nothing to do with the kids because he couldn't have anything to do with me. But I was afraid, and I knew that all he would try to do is sweet talk me into going back, and so I knew I had to keep my distance.
I remember very vividly though my dad being at my bedside, and it was the first time ever in my life I seen my dad cry. I remember the doctor telling me, he said, "You got lucky," and I said, "No, sir, I got blessed." And that was when I knew I needed to figure out how to get away from him. So I went down to my aunt who had a beauty shop. She was doing hair at the time. And I said, I need you to come get me when you get out. The next day though, hell broke loose because he realized I was gone. He started going around the city to some of my family's houses and businesses with a gun. So I went from her apartment to a women's shelter that was for victims of domestic violence, which was very helpful to me. They helped me get my divorce started. They helped me with the protective order. Thankfully, I didn't have to have my daughter live there with me. I sent my daughter to Indianapolis to live with my parents while I was there. But that was how I escaped.
So I take Rico, we go over there, and we're sitting in the driveway, and at first the conversation was really good. I'm thinking, okay, he's, things have changed since I last saw him. He's probably going to come around and actually start to help me with the kids. And Rico, I remember I was just in the car was parked, it was turned off, and Rico's sitting on my lap, and I'm just like kind of bouncing him, on my lap, and we're talking, and he's standing outside my window. And I asked him, I said, were you going to give me the money? I said, I don't remember if it was a bill or groceries, it was something that I needed. And he went to reach in his pocket, but instead of reaching in his pocket for money, it was a gun. And he held it to my head at first, and he was like, I know you're still miserable. He was like, nothing's changed since last time I saw you. And tears just started rolling down my eyes because Rico's still in my lap, just looking. And so I didn't even look at him. I'm just looking at Rico, and I'm like, he's really about to kill me with my son sitting on my lap. And then he took the gun off my head and put it to Rico's. And he said, it's not only going to be you, it's going to be all of you. He was like, because what do I want to do with these kids? And I moved Rico because I was like, there's no way I'm going to let him shoot my son. There's no way. So I moved him. I didn't even put him in the back. I just moved him off to the side of me. I drove a van at that time. So I just put him like in between my seat and the passenger seat. Like, I have to get away. I have to at least try to get away. So I put my van in reverse and I pulled off. I was afraid that he was going to try and shoot like after, as I'm pulling off or whatever. But I kept my hand on Rico, so if he did shoot, that at least I knew Rico he had some kind of protection. But yeah, that was, and I knew then I'm not calling him, because was this a warning? Obviously, if he can do that and he can hold a gun to his own son, he's capable of doing anything. And just thank goodness that he didn't pull the trigger on either one of us.
One of our priorities in providing those services is safety planning. So we want to talk with victims of domestic violence and make sure that they have the tools that they need to be safer. And sometimes that means that they choose to stay in the situation that they're in. We know that when victims leave a domestic violence situation, that can be really dangerous, and almost every story that you see on the news of a domestic violence homicide, it's the ex-girlfriend, the ex-wife, they were breaking up. There's, it's that point in time when the abuser is losing control, that then the only way they can maintain control is through extreme violence and often, or could be, murder.
It was a big transition from them, because when I first left their dad, it was a huge struggle. I mean, I remember days where I didn't know what we were going to eat. I knew that they would eat, but what would I eat? Because I just didn't have enough.
The reality is, while I was fighting for custody of my daughter, I got into therapy. Therapy saved my life. Like, therapy saved my life. And that was, our divorce was final in April of 2010. So it's 10 years later. I'm still in therapy. It is maintenance for me.
To all the men out there dealing with this, I just want to tell you it is okay to ask for help. I know there's a stigma to where we have to be men of the house. We can't, show any emotions. We have to keep pushing, regardless of whatever obstacles come our way. And that's true. You do have to keep pushing, but that doesn't mean you have to do it alone. That doesn't mean you have to do it while fighting the battles and the demons in your head by yourself. It is okay to ask for help. I struggled with that for the longest part of my life, and now I struggled with that for the longest part of my life until I couldn't do it anymore. And I've gotten help now, but I just wish I would have gotten it earlier.
A lot. My goodness, it's just been, I've been divorced from him over 25 years, but I feel like a lot of that I went through is still, it still lingers back there. It still makes me, with my heart, like, it's like with a hard heart. Like, I know I'm a very good person, but when it comes to me personally, I feel like I'm guarded.
But the emotional abuse, like stopping those tapes from replaying over and over in my head, the words that he said to me, that nobody would ever want me, that I'm no good, book smart dummy, you married and divorced you gonna be married and divorced 2 times, you think anybody gonna want you, you gonna have 2 kids by 2 different men, you think somebody gonna find some worth in you. It took forever, it feels like forever, for me to get to a place where I could stop hearing that.
So as advocates, we, number one, want to honor that they are the expert on their own situation. So we would never tell them, don't go, don't do that, don't return. We let that victim make the decision about their own situation, and then we continue to be here to support them if they decide to leave again.
It took me a long time to get to where I am, because I feel like now I'm a much stronger person, and I'm not afraid anymore. Definitely not afraid. Yeah, you might, beat me down or whatever, but it's gonna be a fight.
I would tell her to be kind to herself. Be kind. Because if you saw a child or another person going through what you're going through, what would you do? Would you comfort them? Would you be there for them? Like me, I was told, what if a little girl was going through that and you knew that? The first thing I'm doing is I'm going to console that little baby or that little girl and let her know that it's not your fault. That's the same treatment you need to give yourself. And stop being hard on yourself. Don't take the blame.
I really sat down and took my time with his business plan, gave it to him. They liked the idea. We actually found a building, and so in November of last year, unfortunately Juan wasn't here to enjoy it, but we did open Dreamers Hookah Lounge. Still open today. We're still doing well. We have some obstacles that we're overcoming, but in the long run, it's going to be good.
So, and that's how when I got married this time around, I had already started the process a little bit. I was like, okay, this is what I'm not going to put up with. This is what I'm not. So I showed him the part of me. It wasn't anything fancy or anything. If my hair was messy, it was messy. And, you know, my manners, whatever, if I had rude manners, he was like, I've never met anybody like you. I was like, well, this is me. I'm not going to do that fake stuff. You get what you see. So now I've been married for 16 years, and we're still happy. He puts up a lot of quirks because I do a lot of weird stuff. I'm like a big kid still because I felt like I didn't really get to have a childhood.
Keeping my family close, and feeding me, is what gave me the courage to try some things. So I got into modeling. I wanted to do it for years and was always, you know, I was the underdog and the ugly duckling. So I just never thought. But my bonus mom encouraged me. She's like, I found this workshop, you should try it. And I didn't want to, but make long story short, I did the workshop and became a signed model. So signed with like 4 agencies in the Midwest, doing commercials and short films and all kinds of stuff I never imagined possible for me.
But as far as telling a person that is going through that, find out what you like, find out what you're good at, and go for it. It doesn't matter what age. Take control of your life again. Don't let anybody dictate how your life is going to be. You are in control of your own life, and you just have to go for it.
I created a nonprofit organization called KJI, Institute for the Arts, to pour into young people, to teach them how to use the arts as a platform.
So I just started getting back into the music, taking singing lessons. I even want to go back to ballet. And everybody's like, well, you're too old. You're never too old. As long as you're breathing and you can walk and you can do these things, do it. So I say ignore them and go for it.
But she's a survivor. She always came out on top. No matter what she went through, she always made it on her own with 6 young kids. So she always remained a role model to me and an inspiration in more ways than you can imagine.
Everything I've been through is basically, it's a testimony to help somebody else. And when I thought of it that way, every time I get depressed or get in a rut, I keep telling myself, you have to stand. You have to be strong because there's somebody else that's been through everything you've been through. You know, they've went through divorce, they've been through abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse. You've been through all that. You can tell them, and you can stand tall, you can smile, and you can show them that you can have a normal life.